Okay, I am going to present video number 3 that is based in lesson plan number 3. The informative data, the school name, it does not apply. The theme, have got. Date, December 9, 2020. Grade, first baccalaureate. Class length, 45 minutes. Proficiency level, elementary A2.2 CEFR. Lesson plan designer, Laura Salazar Viteri. The TEFL objectives. During these lessons, students will be able to, for listening, identify and follow instructions as well as understanding a conversation about who they are most similar to. For speaking, use have got correctly. The use of have got correctly. For the reading, answer questions from the reading about tech block. For writing, construct 5 sentences using the information of the table and adverbs of frequency, like always and never. For the methods, in this lesson, I use the audiolingual method, total physical response, direct method, and task-based language learning. The strategies that I used for this lesson was set realistic expectation and goals, visual and manipulatives, speak slowly, use differentiation, whole class work, pair work, and individual work. For the anticipatory set, teacher shows students a photo of 1980s and talk about this decade. Its economic, the Soviet communism, its music, its fashion, and a lot of more things. So here is a picture that the teacher will show to the students, where she shows the hair that they used to have in this decade. Okay, so she was talking about its fashion, their hair, and the teacher will show more pictures to them. This is just an example. In the main teaching input, for the warm-up activity, teacher writes a gap text on the board. Teacher puts students into pairs. Students should look at the sentences and choose a word to complete each gap using the present simple form of the verb. For example, it's the 90s, 80s. We, usually, you have a gap in here, to the library to find information. Another sentence, often a gap, our friends at a cafe to talk. So they need to fill in the gaps. Teacher shows students how have got work. Teachers write some sentences on the board. Like the sentences that the teacher write are similar to this one. I've got my daughter's phone. Have you got a digital camera? Imagine you haven't got the internet. Students need to underline the forms of have got and then decide what I've got means. That is the first activity that they are going to do. Teacher and students check the answers as a class when they finish with this activity. Students complete a table individually. This is the table that they are going to complete. They are going to complete with these words, I, we, you, or they, in the gaps that they have in here. In this part, they are going to complete with he or she. Then when they finish, students check the answers in pairs, and then teacher and students check the answers as a class. Teacher gives students a worksheet to complete. The worksheet is about position of adverbs of frequency. Here is the worksheet. So in the first part, the students need to put the adverbs in brackets in the correct places in each sentence. Use them in the order given. They have one example in here. The first example is I. They have I miss. So they need to put a word in there. And the word that it is missing is I never miss a visit to my parents at the weekend. I go and see them. So they need to complete the whole thing, the 5 sentences. In the second part, it says put the words in the correct order to make the to make them questions. They have an example of how to do it. That is very important because you give like a guide to the students of how to do the whole exercise. So the first sentence says, often how cinema do you to go the. So they need to put in the correct order to make questions. And the correct order for this sentence should be, how often do you go to the cinema? So they need to do from 2 to 7 the same thing. Teacher walks around checking students' understanding and assisting students where necessary. Teacher check if students are using the correct form of the third person and are not using additional auxiliaries in their answers. Teacher and students check the answers, asking students to explain their answers. Then students need to read a reading. Then they need to answer the questions. Here is the reading. It's a reading about, it's a tech block that they need to read, and then they need to answer some questions. When they finish with that, teacher and the students check the answers as a class. Then the students need to read a script. Then teacher put students into pairs to talk about which person is like them. So here is the script that they have to read, and they are going to talk about this script in pairs. And they're going to talk about which person is like them. Which of these persons will be more similar to them. Students need to discuss who they are most similar to. Teacher and students conclude the class by reviewing the topic briefly. For the modeling part, the examples teacher gives at the beginning of the class and the answers to the exercise will provide students with clear contextualized models, which will show students correct form and examples of use in context. Also, a modeling is when the teacher gives the students the worksheet. They have always in the first sentence, as I already showed you, in the first sentence, they always have how they need to complete each exercise. That is also modeling. For the guided practice, students should look at the sentences and choose a word to complete each gap using the present simple form of the verb. Students need to underline the forms of have got and then decide what I've got means. Students need to complete a table individually. Students need to complete a worksheet of position of adverbs of frequency. Students need to read a reading when they need to answer the questions. The students read a script, then they need to talk about which person is like them. Students need to discuss who they are most similar to. For all of these guided activities, teacher walks around the class to monitor. At the end of each activity, they check the answers with the whole group. For the independent practice, students write 5 sentences using the information in a table and also use adverbs of frequency like always and never. Here is a table that they are going to use for writing the 5 sentences using this information. So here they need to write the 5 sentences. Again, they have the first sentences done for them. So so it's an example how they need to do it. Paul usually has breakfast. Okay. Then for the assessment, teacher asks students to ask questions with have you got? An example of this is have you got a notebook? Another student needs to answer to the question, for example, yes, I have, or no, I haven't. And for the closer review and follow-up, the class will be concluded by reviewing the topic briefly. For homework, students need to write 3 sentences that are true for them using have got or haven't got, and 3 got questions. It is very important that students do some homework of the topic they just learned. That way, they are going to learn better and review and do a little bit more of of sentences and review a little bit more of the topic that they just learned. That's why it's very important to do homework. Okay, that will be all for today. Thank you.